Can you talk about what we are facing right now in terms of the systemic issues that you see playing out in front of us?
Right. Well, I think it's pretty clear that Biden is going to do nothing to address the issues that I and I think others have argued gave rise to a figure, a demagogue, a con artist like Trump. In fact, things are about to get exponentially worse. I covered the war in the former Yugoslavia, so I'm intimately familiar with how societies break down. Also worked in the Middle East for 7 years and North Africa, 6 years in Latin America, covered the wars in Central America. And I think it's pretty clear that the tinder that could ignite widespread social unrest and violence lies ominously stacked around us. You have millions of very angry, disenfranchised white Americans. This is Trump's base, living in economic and social misery, enraged at political stagnation, the corruption of the ruling class, a bankrupt liberal elite, which the Democratic Party embodies, and this mounting social inequality, which is about to get much worse. That's on one side. Then you have millions more alienated young men and women who've been locked out of the system and again have a deep animus, which is totally understandable, against governing structures, and often express this through anti-fascism. And the political center is rapidly disintegrating. And then we have added to this mix the fact that the country is awash in military-grade weapons, unable to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic fallout, have unleashed unaccountable, violent, militarized police forces that, in essence, in poor neighborhoods function as internal armies of occupation and de facto allies of these neo-fascists. So, and then we add the fact that we have an estimated 40 million people who will be evicted from their homes because the moratorium on foreclosures and evictions has been lifted by the end of this year. Some, Johns Hopkins, others are estimating that perhaps 400,000 Americans will be dead from the pandemic by 300,000, I think, by December, 400,000 by January.
100,000 people in a month.
Yeah. Well, because it spirals.
Right.
And
unbelievable.
So all of this is kind of coming together, I think, and these are very ominous warning signs. Biden has made it clear that he isn't, or the Democratic Party and Biden has made it clear that they're not going to institute the kind of jobs program that might be able to pull us back from the brink. He said if Medicare for All is passed by Congress and it comes on his desk, he'll veto it. He wants to give more money to the police. We won't get into Biden's long, complicity in militarized police, free trade deals, NAFTA, cheerleaders for these endless wars in the Middle East. So, with or without Trump, it's going to be pretty grim. And in fact, I think if Trump is removed from office, this kind of neo-fascist violence will probably get worse.
As we continue down the road to what you termed, empire collapse, what role do you see the military playing?
Well, I want to make it clear that combat units in the military, like these militias or radical groups that embrace violence, are in and of themselves death cults. For instance, if you attend the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program, this is the 8-week course at Fort Benning in Georgia, to become an Army Ranger, the first thing you have to do is pick what they call it a Ranger in the Sky. This is a Ranger who was killed in action. And you have to investigate their life before they enlisted and what their military career was like. And you have to carry this information on a piece of paper with you at all times. It's an inspectable item. And it functions the same way. It lifts these kids out of, social obscurity to become heroes, warriors. And that's true, whether they're Army Rangers or members of the Patriot Prayer Group. And they have to become willing sacrificial victims. So all, the military itself is complicit in this kind of social sickness, indeed fosters it. The military in the United States is untouchable. It's deified. This was also true in the former Yugoslavia. It was true in Weimar Germany. It consumes a disproportionate amount of resources. They've tried to audit it, but you can't audit it. I mean, it's never been successfully audited. And as the social fabric unravels, the military will take an increasingly a larger role in terms of the political process. But that is exceedingly dangerous, as history has taught us repeatedly. So
some people
now the military doesn't want to intervene in the street process, and made that very clear because they don't need to. Police departments function as paramilitary units with armored personnel carriers. I mean, with Ferguson, we saw armored personnel carriers mounted with 50 caliber machine guns, which were pointed as unarmed protesters. So there's no need for the military to kind of engage in this kind of domestic suppression, because the militarized police have more than enough equipment, lethal equipment, to do the job. As things devolve, I mean, my guess is that if there is widespread social disintegration, then this is going to push the military to play a larger political role. But believe me, that is will be a very ominous moment in American history.
Chris, talking about how the banks are hoarding up money. Can you talk about what this means, and what does this mean to our social fabric as you see it's playing its role in the decline? Right.
So the banks know what's coming, and that's why you can't get any loans from banks. And so what does that mean? It means that...
Meaning people can't buy cars or are...
Yeah, it's very hard now to get any loans because they're hoarding the money to deal with the wave of bankruptcies, defaults on credit card, student loan, car loans, mortgages, household debt. They know that that's what's coming, and so that's why they're not lending. I mean, the economic situation, and Rick Wolff has probably, I think, done the best job of explaining this, is, if we want to kind of simplify it, is essentially the Fed giving large banks and corporations free money, and what they're doing is investing it in this overheated stock market, often buying back their own stock because their compensation is tied to that. And it's just this kind of shell game where you keep investing, and as Rick said, it's the people who pull out first who win before the crash, but they all know that it's coming. It's not in any way sustainable. So you borrow money at virtually 0% interest. You invest it in the stock market. The stocks go up. Other oligarchs and banks are also getting free money from the Fed and investing in the stock market, playing the same game. And then you just try and whoever pulls out before everything goes south wins. That's what's happening. That's why the stock market has no correlation to the economic distress that is happening throughout the country. I mean, the unemployment figures have always been fixed. The Los Angeles Times a year or two ago ran a whole story about this. This is before the pandemic, estimating that real unemployment is about 17%. I mean, if you stop looking for work, you're not counted. If you're furloughed, and we have millions of workers who've been furloughed since the pandemic, you're not counted as unemployed. If you work an hour a week, you're counted as employed. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. So real unemployment is probably close to 20%. And the ruling oligarchs have made it very clear that they are not going to respond rationally. I mean, the CARES Act has been a giant giveaway to large corporations. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Things like the cruise industry have been bailed out, equity firms have been bailed out, and people who are really suffering are getting nothing. Well, the consumer class it's the speculators who drive the economic system now. People who gamble with money, who use money to make more money. They don't actually produce anything. I mean, so all this money that the Fed has handed out, it hasn't gone into producing anything or creating more jobs. It's just you sent trillions of funds or tax breaks to oil companies to keep them afloat. The airline industry, that got $50 billion in stimulus money. As I mentioned, the cruise industry, $170 billion windfall for the real estate industry. Lobbying groups were bailed out. Private equity firms. These people don't make anything. They give a lot of money. I mean, lobbying groups, the political action committees give about $200 million a year to politicians over the last couple of decades. The meat industry has been bailed out. I guess they make meat. Corporations that have moved offshore to avoid U.S. taxes have gotten bailed out. 80% of the tax breaks under the stimulus package went to millionaires. 454 billion, remember, went to this thing called the Treasury Department's Exchange Stabilization Fund. That's this big slush fund that nobody knows where the money's going. It's not accountable, which the Trump administration is just handing out to its cronies. And it can be leveraged. It can be leveraged 10 to 1 to create 4.5 trillion in assets. There was a 1.5 trillion loan to Wall Street, which no one thinks will be paid back. So all of this money has gone to sustain a class of speculators. I mean, speculation in the 17th century in Europe was considered a capital crime. Speculators were hanged. But that's who's running the economy. It's not the old Rockefeller or Carnegie's, or because we don't make anything except weapons. We don't make anything anymore in the United States. That's all made by sweatshop labor in Monterrey, Mexico, or China, or Vietnam, or Bangladesh. Biden, I mean, how could you possibly be enthusiastic for Joe Biden? There's nothing there. I mean, this is a guy who is absolutely empty in terms of a moral or intellectual foundation. Has spent his entire career serving moneyed interest. I mean, they used to call him Senator Credit Card from Delaware because that's where the credit card companies are, which, by the way, employed his son Hunter for very lavish fees. There isn't, he has said to Wall Street in this campaign that there'll be no change in regulations, no change in laws. I mean, the best thing he has going for him is that he's not Trump, and that's kind of what they're playing. The oligarchs like him because he'll bring back a kind of decorum to our imperial presidency and to the empire. But there's a reason he's the nominee. I mean, Lloyd Blankfein and all the other big Democratic donors were very public about this, that if Bernie Sanders was the nominee, they were voting for Trump. I mean, the whole least worst option only applies to you and me. It doesn't apply to them. So they know very well that their interests will be protected, that there won't be any kind of systemic change within what you called it a corporate coup d'etat, which is a term John Ralston Saul coined, which is correct, that the corporate state will continue to consolidate power and money, whether it's Biden or Trump. They prefer Biden, but they can live with Trump. But I hope that the polls are right. But I mean, we did go through this in 2016, and they weren't even close.
If you hope that the polls are right, so you do believe on some level a Joe Biden presidency might be slightly better than what we're seeing now?
Well, he's not insane. I don't think the social situation will be better, or the political or the economic situation. But Trump is so volatile and so inept. I mean, the best we could say about Biden is that we might respond rationally to the COVID-19 crisis, which is totally out of control, and is is just is going to probably keep hitting the American public in wave after wave after wave with incredibly serious health and economic consequences.